All right, our next presentation features three of our favorite Jasons with their session titled Three BIM Models, Three Outcomes, Three Dead Ends. They'll discuss how BIM's original promise of a single source of truth has morphed into the reality of most projects having three different BIM models, all the same name, but each with a different purpose and function. You'll learn about how we got here, what's in each model, and what the future may be. The first in our triad of Jasons is Jason Kunkel. Some of you may have received technical support from him through his role at CAD Microsystems. The second is Jason Peckovitch. As a longtime CAD and BIM expert, Jason is also the Revit MEP content manager for our Augie World magazine. Finally, we'll have Jason Peters. Jason is also one of our Augie World authors and is known by everyone as a structural industry expert, speaker, and community leader. With that, take it away, Jason.
All right. I think I am sharing. So let me kick that off. All right. Thanks for letting us join today. We're excited to be here for the first AuggieCon. Three BIM models, three outcomes, three dead ends, maybe a little hyperbolic there. But kicking things off, Jason P. number one. You are muted.
How's it going? My name is Jason Peckovitch. I currently work for Garver in the buildings team as their BIM manager. As Scott mentioned, I'm also the Augie World Revit MEP content manager. I have over 25 years of experience. I have certification in both mechanical and electrical design for Revit. I have spoke at Built NA before. Something I like to share is that I'm a published photographer. I've done magazine shoots for various vehicles and have those vehicles featured and published in magazines. I'm also a gamer. Consider myself a tech guy, and I have three kids, Shelby, Logan, and Blake, 12, 10, and 6.
On.
Hi, everybody. Jason Peters, senior structural technologist at Associated Engineering as of Monday. I have 25 years of experience in the AC industry, kind of in asterisks, as I spent the last year working with a CAD technical company and recently left there to return to consulting, hence why I'm an Autodesk expert alumni. I as well have three kids. I'm an all-around nice guy for those of you that think I'm not, because sometimes I get a little worked up and excited. And for all of you from Canada, I'm a huge CFL fan. And yeah, we'll move it on to the next Jason.
Awesome. My name is Jason Kunkel. I'm Senior Practice Manager at CAD Microsystems, which kind of means I lead the team. I kind of aim the nerds down the road, hopefully, give them support, give them guidance. Spoken at AU, bunch of builds all over the world. Been doing this for almost 3 decades now. At some point, I'll stop counting the numbers there. Been training on Revit and other applications for years and years. I do a little bit of development. And recently, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm very excited. I've started sharing some education and training by writing and drawing some comic books, which I've always wanted to call myself a comic book artist, and now I can. So
Those are pretty cool.
there you go. Thank you. With that, so I know everybody's thinking that we got together and we decided to present just because our names are all the same and we picked a title and a topic later. Totally not true. No, it's absolutely an amazing coincidence that we all had the exact same idea for a presentation, and then we got together afterwards. This is us. We finally met in person in Dallas. I think we did not intentionally stand descending height and ascending beard length, but that's how we are. We met each other online, as many do in this industry. Obviously, a lot of similarities and cross paths in terms of where we found each other and how we do things. So we're excited to kind of hop in and try this out and be together. as was mentioned, we're going to talk about BIM models. And I think the first thing we need to talk is the unicorn in the room about what was promised to us years and years ago. This idea that there is a single BIM model that unicorns and rainbows and everything's put in there, and it goes and it evolves from just the architect, and it goes on to the contractor construction, and it's passed off to the owner. And every time it goes from step to step, a little more information is put in, a little bit of data is tweaked, and the precise things that each step needs along the way are added until you get this wonderful, beautiful model that has all the relevant data, both geometrically and information-wise, and the owners don't need to worry about anything in terms of paper anymore, and it's great and it's perfect, it's wonderful. This is closer to what we have. This is not a precise diagram, obviously, but over the years, we've all kind of discovered that each individual entity is kind of finding its own path in terms of BIM models, what they're doing with it and what they're not doing with it, and along the way, why these things may die. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think evolution and finding how tools really end up working is important and essential, especially in this industry, especially in technology, but it is not exactly what we were promised a couple decades ago. So with that, we're going to crack into architects and engineers first.
All right. So from the design side, I want to highlight the word models here because we don't have a single model for the design team. We have a multitude of models, right? Let me make sure all right. Did I skip? Nope. Okay. So what are some drivers for the designers and engineers, right? A lot of firms want to be at the top of the innovation list. They want to be innovating and think they may be at the top, but maybe they're not. A lot of engineers are problem solvers. They want to get a problem and solve it. Architects and sometimes engineers like to include sustainability in their designs. And of course, everyone wants to win more business. So how do we get there, right? So ideally, everyone would be working in the same model, right? If we're passing this along to contractors and owners, we would be in the same model. Most of the time, this does not work and is a complete disaster, right? So what you end up having is a multitude of models from each discipline, right? You can have your architectural model, you have your MEPF model, which could also have multiple models, one for each discipline: mechanical, electrical, plumbing, telecommunication, fire protection, and then you have your structural model. When it comes to the architectural model, right, their design may be they may be concentrating on the art of the building rather than the function of the building. And so they're heavy on visualization using Enscape and Twin Motion. And the function might not be there, right? Ceilings may be too high and not enough room for a mechanical and structure to coordinate, right? On the other hand, you could get a firm that is relying on the function of the building and not so much the art. So maybe they didn't model everything. A lot of things are in 2D because they want to convey that design, but not necessarily model things, right? They also are probably using the model as a marketing tool. So they're going to make it look good, but it may not work well. I don't know. Is anybody monitoring chat while we're talking? For an MEP model, right, we're diagrammatic or design intent. Our piping and our conduit are not laid out in the exact place that they need to be. They're laid out so that we can read them on the 2D plans, right? If anything that's modeled 3D may or may not be coordinated with other disciplines. I know everyone's can relate to this, where you have lights right on the same ceiling grid as an air diffuser, or a occupancy sensors right in the same tile as a sprinkler head. Some of that internal coordination doesn't happen, but when it does, it works wonderfully. Sometimes we use our MEP models as a training tool. Maybe we set it up to be what we want it to look like in the end for our users to replicate across all projects, but it may not be a good design. It may not be coordinate, like I said, coordinated. And also we'd like to use this stuff as a marketing tool as well to convey to our clients that we can do the work that we're saying we're doing. Or a structural model, right? Whatever they do model, because they may not model everything, they may export it to RISA or some other tools for analysis. So that's a second model for structural. They may also export it to a tool like Advanced Steel or Tekla to do the connections, right? Because they may not be doing that in Revit, even though Revit has improved that functionality in recent versions to have those connections there, but a lot of people still aren't doing them there, right? They also duplicate items that are in the architectural model, like load-bearing walls, floors, roofs. They'll be in the structural model, but they'll also be in the architectural model. So when those all models are linked together, which version do you show, right? Do you show the architectural model, the walls, or do you show the structural walls? Typically I'd probably show the architectural walls and then turn off the structure and only turn it on for coordination. So why do our design models die, right? So usually at the end of design, we may hand them off to the contractor, but we have fear of litigation, right? We don't want to be responsible if something goes wrong. We don't want to necessarily share our proprietary information. We might export as IFC or export it as CAD and give them CAD files. Maybe the model is not detailed enough, or sometimes it's over detailed for what's needed. There's always interoperability issues between software, right? So Revit doesn't always talk to the CNC machines that they use to cut the ductwork in the pipe. So that has to be exported to a different program that integrates with those machines, right? And constantly upgrading or updating the file has a huge cost and time, and there's time constraints, right? Maybe there's no budget to keep going back in there and making things, put them in the correct location. So all in all, typically our models will die when we hand them off to contractors.
Speaking of contractors, we wanted to break this up into kind of 3 different major groups. We wanted to make sure we're kind of highlighting the needs and the purposes and the drivers for each of these different groups, why they are using them. There's clearly going to be some overlap, but there's going to be less overlap than not overlap. Specific needs and wants and purposes. Obviously, the contractors, I feel over the years, especially early on, the architects got in, they recognized the value of BIM. They started working on BIM in a silo. Contractors started recognizing it, and they did a little leapfrog, especially the larger contracting firms. They didn't call it BIM, of course, they call it VDC, but that's what it was. It was BIM in their own little silo, taking the model for their own purposes and using it to make their jobs more effective, a little bit easier there. So the drivers are win more business. Everybody wants that. We're here to make some money, reduce rework, increase the margins, mitigate risks in quality and safety. Safety is such a key, huge contributor and need for contractors on job sites. I think on the design end, where we often, overlook that and think about it, you may fall out of your chair. That's the problem, obviously, but you don't want to fall down on a job site from a 20-story building. So in terms of what they're using the model for, pre-construction, obviously, this is what sold BIM to a lot of organizations in the beginning. Clash detection, you can build the building virtually before you break ground, before you spend any money. There's been talk, and I've seen a chart floating around about the exponential increase of design changes as you go down design to pre-con to construction to handover. So the earlier they can catch these issues in design ahead of time, obviously, the more money they're going to save and the better it's going to be for everybody. Visualization. I am from the architecture end. I do want to give a shout out to Matt Haraka from my organization to help me kind of put this together. He's not here today because it's his birthday, so happy birthday, Matt. But visualization, when I think about it on the architecture end, it's going to be, renderings, pretty pictures. But it also very effectively can simply mean conveying design intent. conveying to individuals how things are going to look when they are constructed. We often forget that we had to be trained how to read sections and how to read plans and how to understand a set of documentation. And you put those 2D views in front of people who are not in the industry, it can often be challenging for them to kind of recognize and understand exactly what's going on. So a 3D and a BIM model is extremely effective in getting them in the space and recognizing how that space is going to be put together. Very early on in my career, I was doing detention design, which is about as depressing as you might think it is. But sight lines are obviously important, and being able to see into the day room and knowing what you're going to see is critical. One of our first projects was, one of our first Revit projects was a jail, and it wasn't perfect, but it was extremely effective to just put a camera down inside that model and look around to see where there might be challenges for safety and security. Layout is another reason they're going to use the BIM model. This is taking the design information, it's bringing it into the field, it's placing it as close and as precise to where it should be or where the electronic drawings and models indicate it to be. So VDC team can use the models, it can put it exactly where it was designed. It can back check install worked, make sure it's where it was intended to be. This, of course, is going to require a very precise model, not just in terms of the geometry of the building itself, but in terms of where it's placed in the world. The GIS information and the geographic information embedded in that model as well. Estimated, certainly not on a full-blown, we're going to get the estimate and the cost of the building from the model, but streamline things in terms of quantity takeoff, in terms of counting elements, and then, building Excel files and building what they need off of that to do the cost estimation. It's going to help in the bid management communication. It's going to help in accuracy and procurement. If you've got, again, it's got to be an accurate model. It doesn't necessarily have to be that geometrically accurate if you're simply doing a counting of objects. But if you are doing that QTOs, then yeah, you need to make sure that your elements are the same, the size that you're expecting them to be. Issue management. So there is a significant need to track relevant matters in relation to where they are, quote unquote, physically, where they are in space, in 3D. This is a snapshot of the Autodesk Construction Cloud. You can create issues. On the model itself, you can tell specifically where that issue is. And this is extremely simple for individuals to come in and take a look and zoom in and pan around and see where the issues are in relation to the model itself, and not have to go and say, go look for, column grid intersection A17.1 on the third floor, go about 3 feet away from that and look up. Immediately effective, immediately understanding where those elements are and where the issues can be. Progress tracking. So to keep an eye on what's been installed, to track status of assets by associating the model elements with the actual installed and real thing that's in there. You can tag the element in the model. You can say, yep, this is here. Nope, this is not here. And you can very quickly kind of get an understanding and track the pace of the building and see what might be late and what might be coming up. Speaking of late and coming up, they are certainly going to be using the model for scheduling and sequencing. And this isn't exclusively just for the progress of the construction. This is going to be used for, laydown, for bringing in heavy equipment, for seeing the flow of the pace of the different disciplines throughout the building and make sure they're not stepping on each other's toes and getting in each other's way. What is the site going to look like at a certain point during the schedule? And is it going to be able to accommodate what is there and what's going to be there? So building on that, we talked about this a little bit, but what's needed, what's not needed in the model. Typically detail sheets, 2D elements, contractor's not going to exclusively need these. They've got the PDFs, they've got the drawings. That's what's stamped, that's what's signed. For the majority of our industry still, that is still what is gospel. Certainly some elements, some entities are accepting models delivery at this point, but it is the It is rare. So we're still in a 2D world. The depth of use is then going to impact what the model is going to need. So issue management, they might be able to use the design model. They just kind of generally need to know where things are in the building so they can tag that issue. Layout, as I mentioned, it's got to be geo-referenced. It's got to be an accurate model because you are literally taking a machine and telling it that is where you are starting. That is where that thing is in the real world. Sequencing. Wow, sorry, Friday afternoon. You're going to want your model there. You're going to want your elements divided up by discipline, by construction phase, and then estimating force. You want your model broken down by materials and components. So what's not happening in these models typically, unless asked, and of course, when we say asked, we mean contractually obligated, and even then, sometimes it doesn't happen. The model typically at the end is not ready for construction. We talked about these different purposes, these different functions, and so the models are being peeled off for these different needs. There's no one single entity responsible for these different needs either. So there's not like one master overseeing all of these models to make sure they're all at the same pace, at the same location, and doing the same thing. LOD 500 information, that was the dream. This is not getting plugged in back into the model unless it's, again, contractually required. We're not getting as constructed model elements. We get a lot of conversations about who should be making that as constructed model. Is it the contractor? Is it the architect? Typically, it's going to come back to which model is going to live on past construction. And then, as we've all been talking about, a single model for each purpose. There are multiple purposes. There's multiple models. We all know what bloat on a model is going to do, how it's going to slow things down. And that's primarily why each of these models has kind of evolved on its own thing. A single model with every discipline, with every need, with every human in there is going to slow things down and make things problematic for the entire team, most likely. So why contractor model dies? Owners feel it's too complicated. You're either going to get it if it's a very elaborate model, if it's LOD 500 in terms of construction. Do they need all that structural information, all that structural geometry? Or are they happy that it's simply standing up? There are more than one model. The owner's not sure which one they need to deal with and which one has the information they want and the information they don't want. They're often a pre-construction model that's being built for clash detection, for sequencing, but it is not kept up to date throughout construction to make sure that it is up to snuff with the conditions that were built in the field. And then the final one that we usually find is that construction model, like all these other models, is really multiple models. And a lot of time, this federated model is made up of individual 3D models from subcontractors. It might be from a very specific piece of software that the owner simply doesn't have access to or doesn't understand how to handle that model at all. Right?
All right. Thank you, Jasons. BIM models for owners. I actually want to give a quick little shout out to one of the sessions I was in earlier today on facility management. That was really great. And I actually learned a whole bunch. And so I actually almost feel totally unqualified now to be talking about BIM models for owners. Let's see here. There we go. Drivers for owners. The big BIM promise. I'm going to start off with just a quick little story about when I first started doing BIM and what the whole big picture was supposed to be. It was explained to me when I first started that it's going to start off in the design office and someone's going to design a building. The engineer is going to do his bit. All those models are going to get pieced together. And in there is going to be all the information, how many chairs, how many steel beams, everything. And then that's going to get shipped off to the contractor. And they're going to build off that model because all the information is in there. And they're going to be able to do quantities, quantity takeoffs, quality control, all that great contractor stuff. And then once the building or process is done, that model is going to go to the owner or the facilities manager. And the end promise that I was first told was, picture this. You have a building's maintenance man standing on the roof. He is able to take out his little scanner, scan the rooftop unit, and all the information is going to come up about that unit, where it was manufactured, how it was installed, the maintenance, and everything. So that, back in the day when I was first introduced to BIM, was the BIM process. And as we've discovered so far, we've gone through the 2 steps, we've gone through architectural engineering and into contracting. We can still see how it's within itself in that spot together. But once we move to another person, we're still silent. And the same comes with owners. The promise of the model for the owner is for them to do their space management, streamline and improve maintenance, do life cycle enhancements such as renovations and everything. And also, one of the big ones now that I maybe should have had at the beginning of the slide is increase project overview, which allows them to look at their project, make decisions as it goes along, decide whether, they want this type of window, that type of window, what type of machinery. So that is the big BIM promise for the owner, facility manager, property manager. And now we're going to get into what do we do versus what we could or should do. And this is basically, what do they get and what do they use it for, and if they get anything at all. We've all seen on the slide on the left, you've all walked into a building and said, oh, hey, I'm here to do a renovation. I'm here to service something. I'm here to just do an inspection. Where are all your drawings? And, the nice maintenance guy comes up, meets you at the front door, takes you down to the basement. You go into this office and it is just filing cabinet after filing cabinet and row upon row of dirty, dusty drawings. And you're like, oh, okay. But now the promise is, now you don't need that. Now you get to go take your tablet, take your Revit model, get out to the site, wander around, start scanning things, hitting QR codes, hitting barcodes, looking at it virtually. And that is supposed to be the promise. That is the big BIM promise. We want to go from dusty dungeon to fancy tablet. That's what the goal is. That's what the facilities management wants. They want to be able to track their process. Is their process running as it's supposed to? Is the environmental controls that they're building, is it actually promising what their environmental promise was when they got LEED certified? And that all comes down to, have we educated and are they knowledgeable? What I mean by that is, have we educated building owners and facility managers in the type of knowledge that they need? Do they know what a Revit model is going to do for them? Do they understand what ACC could do for them? Do they understand being involved with the process from beginning to end, and the importance of why we're trying to do what we do, what BIM means, and how it's going to affect them? How, if you want to be a digital twin as to a physical twin, how that all affects their business and their facility. Really, I kind of wanted to just come to this really quickly and dive through those first 3 slides really quick, because I really want to focus on why the owner's model dies, if they even have a model, for that matter. And I have a few bullet points here that I just really, really wanted to touch on. And I just mentioned it before, the lack of understanding of the model and what it provides. This comes down to, there are a lot of building owners out there, facility managers, that just don't know what BIM entails, what effort, what knowledge, what data has been put into a model, a spreadsheet. Anything that they get digitally from the contractor, they're not too sure exactly what's in there and what it's going to do for them. And that comes down to a lack of education on BIM and technology such as digital twins or just in Revit altogether. And that's where I think the big play of designers and contractors, we now need to go and educate them or explain to them further as to how this works within their facility. We don't want to see a design model go to a building owner and be saved on their hard drive. And when you show up, they've printed off a stack of 11 by 17 hard drawings and they go, okay, well, here, everything we've changed, we've marked up on here. Or the contractor doesn't want to have to go in there and they're changing out rooftop units, and the exact same thing happens when they've provided them with a BIM model, with the location of all the units and all the QR codes, where it's from, and everything. A lot of owners, facility managers, their models will die because they just assume the cost of managing and using the model is too expensive for them. They either A, don't have the software to use it. They don't have the technical staff to use it. That's once again where, from the beginning of the project, we can explain to them how to use the model. No, you don't need the model. There's other software you can use. You're not going to have to go out and hire like 14 Revit users to help manage your building. It's just not the way. And here's one of my favorite ones: lack of communications throughout the project. This is, an owner comes up, goes to an architect and says, I want a building. I want it to have 5 commercial units and a warehouse in the back. And this is how much money I want to spend. I'll see you in 2 years when it's done to give you the check and we'll just walk away. I don't think that they're starting to realize that they can now play a role in it if they can communicate their needs as the design goes and go, okay, hey, I've been involved with the design process. I know that these 5 units aren't going to quite work with what I want. How do we do renovations if you put this type of floor system in? I see that you're putting in this type of insulation. Is this going to be good enough for, let's say, the ice cream parlor that wants to rent this space? BIM will allow them to openly communicate, view, and see what's going on in the project from design to construction, to finish completion, to maintenance, and to renovation in the future. A lot of them also look at it like this. Like I just mentioned, they just want a building. They don't want a model. They don't want to have anything else. And a lot of them, especially when you look at factories and design work, they all feel that process makes money. They rather spend their BIM dollar on running their process. They rather digitize that, have that all up to speed, and forget about the building itself, not realizing that, yes, your building itself is not going to make you money, but your building itself is going to save you money if you can use the same software and the same mindset on it that you do your process. Take, for example, they're always concerned that this machine is not working to what we were told to. How come that is? We can go back, they look at their data and they go, oh, we need to feed it more of this. Okay, then, but they don't realize that they can do the same thing with their building. Oh, why is our building so cold all the time when we're running this piece of equipment? Oh, here it is. Our ventilation is only certified for this. We only have this type of insulation. Maybe we should look at redoing that. Those are things that I think the owners need to start taking into mind when it comes to BIM and models. And they need to realize that it's more than just a way to construct something. There's also the way to maintain it and to advance it by doing renovations and by updating and, excuse me, keeping control over what their building maintenance and facility maintenance looks like. I think that was it on my end, Jason.
All right, yeah. So wrapping up then, consolidating some of the slides. Why are there multiple models? Specialization, detailing needs, different stages of the construction process. It's going to require different levels of detail, different levels of specialization. Designers, contractors, and operations managers have distinct needs, and they're going to use that model for very, very different ways. And that's going to require changes to that original design model. We talked a little bit about responsibility, liability. We are often in a design, bid, build world. And there are walls set up, walls legally, contractually, and the separate models is going to help with those walls, and it's going to help delineate responsibility. It's going to help reduce liability. It's going to, make sure that discrepancies in one model may not find their way into discrepancies and issues within another model. Certainly technology and process limitations, that's across the board. That's with everything we do these days. BIM software is far beyond where it was years and years ago. It's amazing stuff. We all enjoy working with it, but there are still challenges around usually interoperability between different platforms, limitations in the technology's ability to manage all the aspects and all those different needs that we saw in design, in construction, and even with the owner's needs as well. And then there's project management and communication challenges. So multiple models, it can help with communication, it can help streamline the needs, and it can make individuals' jobs easier if they're not all in one single model. Some of the takeaways we kind of built from this: it's always evolving. The conversation we're having now is a very different conversation than we even had 5 years ago. I think the phrase of the day, digital twin, was brought up during our talk, but 2 years ago, we would not have been talking about it at all. We've seen certainly working in the cloud, speeding up collaboration, speeding up the integration, which is helping to break down those walls, usually within the same silos, but often between the silos as well, where they have to start understanding the needs of the different models, the needs of the different entities, and start building the models in certain ways. We are seeing owners driving the full BIM life cycle. It's not going to be driven by the design team. It's not going to be driven by the contractor. If entities want the promise of BIM to the degree that is sensible and practical, the owner needs to make the decision. It's got to be contractual, it's got to be monitored, and it's got to be enforced as well. And then, of course, there's don't expect too much. Unicorns and rainbows, they're beautiful, but they're unicorns and rainbows. We've got to work in reality and work with what's possible for us all. So with that, that's us. I think there's a lot of chats. I don't want to click the chat because I'm presenting. Somebody else go in the chat and kind of paw through there.
Chat's been talking about the issues out in
Any questions
issues for AC. A couple questions came through, but it looked like Christina tackled them. They were not necessarily related to our presentation. There's one question that says, from another Jason, ironically, there are walls, but what about the sectors looking for tear down those walls, like infrastructure? Model as deliverable is becoming a buzzword in that world, and I understand from my colleagues it's moving into being a requirement from some states. Disney also used model as deliverable for Galaxy's edge architecture, from what I've read. Like IDP, it's starting to move into a more integrated system. What is the panel seeing in this sort of movement?
I'll hop in first. We are definitely talking with more people now about not exclusively model as a deliverable, but a more robust BIM workflow. We've got a couple entities we're talking to about model as a deliverable, but honestly, we're kind of at step 1 of 20 steps to get there. There's a lot of standards, there's a lot of expectations, but then, especially for the bigger owners that need this, they need the right partners. They need to make sure that the designers and the contractors are there as well. So it really is kind of a team effort. Even if they say, give me a model, they've got to make sure they have individuals and teams that can actually give them that model. So it's happening. I don't think we're going to get away from PDFs for a very, 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 very long time. But that's where I sit from this one. Jason and Jason?
I'll jump in really quick and kind of give you the the gist from, I'm from Canada. So this is how things, the Canadian version of it is just with a nicer accent than the other Jason. Is pretty well the exact same thing. There's so much legal talk and legal itemization about a model and can it be the legal document for construction. Up here in Canada, it's still currently, just like Jason was saying, that we still need to issue a wet seal on drawings, and it still needs to be sealed, and your specs still need to, at the end of the day, get printed off and put it in a binder. And until they can, really work out the intricacies of how do we legally make something that can be shared by so many people at any given time a legal document, we're, at least here in Canada, we're still going to have separate models, sealed drawings. You'll be able to produce your steel off of a model by going through your CNC machine, but you're not going to be able to send, let's say, your Revit model to the city of Winnipeg and go, okay, can I have my building permit, please? Here's my model. Not anywhere in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen similar things, right? We have municipalities that want PDFs, maybe sometimes drawings. If we are required to give a model like we have on some government projects, most of the people involved in that project don't even know what to do with the model once they get it, right? We could train them on how to use it or train them on how to use Navisworks to view things. But at the end of the day, they still don't know, what to do with it. So PDFs are going to be it for a while. And so it doesn't matter what we do in 3D, right? People want it to look good on paper or PDF. Now, there is a question in the chat. It's probably not something we can answer. And somebody pointed to talk to Melanie. I'm recently back on the owner side and plan to use the BIM files for facility management for a large building currently under construction. What software is available or recommended for facility management? I think I don't know if she mentioned actual software in her presentation this morning, but it was what ID. I don't remember what the acronym was that she did. Katie said she did mention software.
I mean, there's obviously different players out there. I am certainly not an expert. I have the phone number of a guy who's an expert, but FM Systems has applications. Aptura is a developer that has a bunch of applications. We're seeing a lot of interest in Tandem at this point. None of them do everything. Some are good at assets and some are good at space management and planning. It seems like people figure out what they most want to do with it, and then they find the application that's best at what they most want to do with it. Archibus, Maximo, those are kind of the traditional ones that are out there. Most of them, I would say, sort of interact with the model. I would say Tandem is the one that interacts most effectively directly with the model there, though.
Does it require a model upload or does it get it from ACC?
I mean, it's ACC. It's Tandem is looking at docs.
There was a similar program probably 15 years ago, or not 15, 10 years ago called Datagate. It's a company out of Colorado where you would upload the Revit model for facilities, and there had all kinds of interactions, but it didn't go anywhere. Died quick. All right, there's a question from John DeLeon. In an ideal world, do you suggest the owner of a building mandates all ACC companies use one Revit model with the help of work sharing and BIM 360 to build their model to help prevent clash eviction issues?
I mean, I would
take the lead.
Go ahead.
I'll take the lead on that one really quick. I would say that not to mandate really what software, but be involved from the project from day one. Be involved with the process, get involved, and say, okay, well, we're going to really run a very tight BIM project. get a good BIM execution plan going, get a good handover plan going, get your key players, your designers, your engineers, your contractor, yourself, your facilities management team, get everyone in one room, spend a couple hours, hash it out. How are you going to go from point A to point Z and all points in between, and everyone being on the same page? Not having to, when you hand over a model, change your design coordinates. When you hand over a model, having to change modeling software. Pick a software, pick a plan, and stick with it. That would be what I would say owners now need to start doing.
As an American, I have no idea where point Z is, but beyond that, I'd agree with that significantly, right? Mandates are tough. Mandates are tough to enforce. You've got to make it like Jason was saying. It's almost a cultural thing. You make the team part of a team. You make them want to do it. You tell them why it's happening, and don't try to do everything all at once. Every time we see entities, it can be designers, it can be contractors, it can be owners. They want to do the entire soup to nuts the first time. It fails every time. You figure out your higher priorities and you tackle those high priorities.
I would say not to be in a single model, especially if you're not in the same firm, right? You don't want an outside firm accidentally moving your stuff or deleting your stuff. But having great communication between all parties involved to make sure that, if something changes, that it's well known, right? I worked on a project this week where the architect decided to move the levels 6 inches up, and I caught it in a section, and so I fixed it in our model, but structural didn't fix it in theirs as of earlier today. And so other people were seeing that there was a difference between our structural model and our MEP model. But there's got to be great communication, regardless of if you're, different models. Some firms don't even use ACC, so you still gotta do the old-fashioned sharing your model. Trying to get with the bridge functionality now, everyone use their own hub and use the bridge, or do you still collaborate in the same hub? And whose hub do you collaborate in? Lots of questions, maybe not all good answers. Another comment maybe from Jason: the right partners is very, very key phrase to me. I can see a future where designers and contractors become more integrated design build partnerships by necessity of owners driving demands on their end. And then he put the PDFs review or the same argument question I've put forth to my infrastructure engineering colleagues, and the states have shrugged at it. It could be a difference in permitting vertical and buildings versus transportation and bridges. I'll need to press them a bit harder for understanding on how that sector is moving in that direction. Thanks.